The morning of the memorial ceremony, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes, unable to move. The Texas Medical Center was honoring my father today, unveiling a portrait in the cardiology wing that would hang alongside the other pioneers who had shaped the institution. Dr. Harold Mitchell, one of the first Black cardiac surgeons in the state, a man who had saved thousands of lives and opened doors for countless others who looked like him. My father, my hero, gone 6 months now, and the grief still hit me in waves that threatened to pull me under. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a navy blue dress that he had always said brought out the warmth in my brown skin, paired with simple gold jewelry that would not distract from the real accessory I planned to wear. My father's Rolex Submariner, the watch he had worn every day for 30 years, the watch he had placed in my hands 3 days before he died. "This is yours now, baby girl," he had whispered, his voice weakened by the cancer that was stealing him from us. I bought this watch with my first real paycheck as an attending surgeon. 1985. I was 32 years old, and I had just performed my 100th successful bypass. I wanted something to remind me every day of what was possible, of how far I had come from that little house in 3rd Ward where your grandmother raised me on a nurse's salary and prayers. He had pressed the watch into my palm, his fingers trembling but his eyes fierce with love. Wear it when you need to remember that you come from people who did impossible things. You are my greatest accomplishment, Vanessa. Not the surgeries, not the awards, not the papers. You? I had worn that watch every day since his funeral. Every morning when I scrubbed in for surgery, feeling the weight of it on my wrist, I imagined him standing beside me, guiding my hands as he had guided them through my residency. Every difficult case, every moment of doubt, I would touch the watch face and remember that I came from a man who had been told his entire life that he could not, and who had spent his entire life proving that he could. I went to the safe in my closet, the fireproof box where I kept the watch each night along with other valuables. I entered the combination, heard the familiar click, and opened the door. The watch was not there. I felt my heart stop, then restart with a painful lurch. I reached into the safe, pushing aside documents and jewelry boxes, searching for the familiar weight of the steel and gold timepiece. Nothing. The space where I always placed the watch was empty. I tore through the safe completely, removing every item, checking every corner. Then I searched the closet, the bathroom, the bedroom. I crawled on hands and knees across the floor, looked under furniture, checked places where the watch could never logically be. With each passing minute, my panic escalated into something approaching hysteria. The watch was gone. My father's watch. The last physical connection I had to the man who had shaped everything I was. Gone. I heard Kevin's footsteps on the stairs and called out to him, my voice cracking. Kevin, come here, please." My husband appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the ceremony in a suit I had bought him last year. Kevin was a handsome man, tall with an athletic build and the kind of easy smile that had charmed me when we first met at a mutual friend's wedding 7 years ago. He had seemed so different then, so supportive and proud of my career, so unlike the men who were intimidated by a woman who earned more than they did. "What's wrong?" he asked, his tone carrying an edge of impatience that had become increasingly common in recent months. "My father's watch, the Rolex. It's not in the safe. Have you seen it?" Something flickered across his face, a micro-expression that was there and gone so quickly I almost missed it. A tightening around his eyes, a slight tension in his jaw. "No, I haven't. Are you sure you put it there?" "I put it there every single night, Kevin. You know that. It's the only place I ever keep it." He shrugged, moving to adjust his tie in the mirror. "Maybe you moved it and forgot. You've been stressed lately with all the memorial planning." I didn't move it. I would never forget where I put that watch. I stood up from where I had been kneeling on the floor, my legs unsteady. Someone took it. Took it? Who would take it? We're the only ones with the combination to that safe. The implication of his words hung in the air between us. We were the only ones with the combination, Kevin and me. No one else had access to our bedroom, to our closet, to the safe where I kept my most precious belongings. "Kevin, look at me." I waited until his eyes met mine. "Do you know where my father's watch is?" "No, Vanessa, I don't." His voice was firm, but he could not quite hold my gaze. "I don't know why you're looking at me like that. I didn't touch your father's watch." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that there was an innocent explanation, that the watch had somehow been misplaced, that it would turn up in some obvious location, and we would laugh about my panic. But something in my gut told me that was not going to happen. Something was wrong, something beyond a missing watch, and my husband's evasiveness only amplified my unease. "The ceremony starts in 2 hours," I said quietly. I was going to wear that watch. I was going to accept that portrait on my father's behalf, wearing the watch he gave me on his deathbed. "It's just a watch, Vanessa." Kevin's voice carried a note of irritation now. "Your father's memory doesn't live in an object. Wear something else and let's go. We're going to be late." Just a watch. The words hit me like a physical blow. My father's Rolex, the symbol of everything he had achieved, the tangible reminder of his journey from poverty to prominence, reduced to just a watch by a man who had never achieved anything comparable in his entire life. I attended the ceremony without the watch, accepting condolences and making small talk while my mind churned with questions and fears. The portrait was beautiful, capturing my father's warm eyes and dignified bearing. I gave a speech about his legacy, his pioneering spirit, his commitment to opening doors for those who came after him. I smiled and shook hands and pretended that my world had not just shifted on its axis. Kevin stood beside me through all of it, playing the role of supportive husband, while his mother, Lorraine, watched from the audience with the barely concealed hostility she had shown me since the day we met. She had never approved of me, had made that clear from the beginning. I was too educated, too successful, too independent for her taste. A woman like me would never properly submit to her son, would never make him feel like the head of the household, would never prioritize his needs above my own career. After the ceremony, while I was speaking with one of my father's former colleagues, I noticed Kevin step away to take a phone call. He moved to a quiet corner, his back to the room, his posture suggesting a conversation he did not want overheard. I watched him for a moment, noting the way he laughed at something, the way his body language shifted to something more relaxed and intimate than he ever displayed with me anymore. When he returned, I asked who had called. "Just Mom," he said. "She wanted to tell me how nice the ceremony was." I nodded, but I did not believe him. Lorraine had been sitting 20 feet away from us during the ceremony. She could have told him in person. Whatever that call had been about, it was not a simple compliment on the event. That night, after Kevin had gone to bed, I sat in my home office and opened Instagram on my phone. I rarely used social media, too busy with surgeries and patients and the endless administrative demands of my position. But something compelled me to check Lorraine's account, the profile she updated obsessively with photos of her garden, her church events, her grandchildren from Kevin's sister. I scrolled through her recent posts, not sure what I was looking for until I found it. The most recent photo had been posted just 3 hours ago, while Kevin and I were at the memorial ceremony. It showed Lorraine's wrist, adorned with a watch I recognized instantly. A Rolex Submariner, steel and gold, with a distinctive scratch on the crystal near the 3 o'clock position. A scratch my father had received during an emergency surgery in 1998, when a patient's chest cracked open unexpectedly, and he spent 14 hours putting the man back together. The caption read, "My son always takes care of his mama." This beautiful gift proves that I raised him right. Some women don't appreciate what they have. I do. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred with tears that I refused to let fall. My father's watch, on my mother-in-law's wrist, given to her by my husband, stolen from my safe, while I grieved and planned and prepared to honor the man who had meant everything to me. Some women don't appreciate what they have. My mother-in-law was wearing my dead father's watch and posting about it on social media with a caption that was clearly a dig at me. I put down my phone and sat in the darkness for a long time, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. The grief was still there, and the shock, and the devastating sense of betrayal. But beneath all of that, something else was emerging. Something that felt like clarity. Something that felt like resolve. Kevin and his mother had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that my kindness was weakness, that my generosity was stupidity, that my love was something they could exploit without consequence. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Did not sleep that night. I lay in bed beside my husband, listening to his peaceful breathing, and I thought about everything that had led to this moment. 7 years of marriage to a man I thought I knew. 7 years of working 12-hour shifts and coming home to cook dinner and maintain a household. 7 years of paying for vacations and cars and home improvements, while Kevin contributed barely enough to cover his personal expenses. I had never minded being the primary breadwinner. My salary as a surgeon was substantial, and I had always believed in partnership, in supporting each other's strengths and compensating for each other's weaknesses. Kevin's job at a mid-level accounting firm paid modestly, but I had told myself that money was not everything, that his emotional support and companionship were worth more than any salary. But now, lying in the darkness, I began to question what emotional support he had actually provided. When had he last asked about my day, my patience, my struggles? When had he last shown genuine interest in my career or pride in my accomplishments? More and more, our conversations revolved around his needs, his frustrations, his mother's opinions and demands. Lorraine. The woman had been a thorn in my side since Kevin first introduced us. She had looked me up and down that first meeting, taking in my confident posture and professional demeanor, and I had seen something flicker in her eyes that I now recognized as threat assessment. I was not the kind of woman she had envisioned for her son. I would not defer to her judgment, would not make her the center of my household, would not diminish myself to make Kevin feel bigger. Over the years, her disapproval had manifested in 1,000 small cuts. Comments about my cooking, my housekeeping, my decision not to have children yet. Questions about why I worked so much, why I did not take better care of my husband, why I seemed to think my career was more important than my family. She called me arrogant, ambitious, cold. She told Kevin he deserved someone who would appreciate him properly. And Kevin had never defended me. Not once. He would shrug off her comments, tell me I was being too sensitive, change the subject to avoid conflict. His loyalty had always been to his mother first, and I had accepted that because I loved him and believed that eventually he would see me clearly and choose our marriage over her manipulation. I had been a fool. The Rolex on Lorraine's wrist was not just a stolen object, it was a declaration of war. It was Kevin and his mother announcing that my grief, my memories, my sacred connections to my father meant nothing compared to their desires. They had taken the most precious thing I owned and given it away like it was a trinket. I would not let that stand. But I would not act rashly either. I was a surgeon, trained to be methodical and precise even under the most extreme pressure. I would gather information, assess the situation, develop a plan. And when I was ready, I would act with the same decisive certainty that guided my hands in the operating room. My father had taught me that excellence was the best revenge against those who doubted you. But he had also taught me that sometimes the only appropriate response to betrayal was to protect yourself by removing the betrayers from your life. Tomorrow I would begin to understand exactly how deep this betrayal went. And then I would decide what to do about it. I confronted Kevin the next morning, my father's watch shining from the screen of my phone. I had taken a screenshot of Lorraine's Instagram post, preserving the evidence before she could think to delete it. The photo showed every detail of the Rolex, every characteristic that made it unmistakably my father's. The steel and gold band he had chosen because he wanted something classic and enduring. The blue face he had selected because it reminded him of the ocean he had dreamed about as a child growing up far from any beach. And the scratch, that distinctive mark near the 3 o'clock position that held a story only our family knew. "Explain this," I said, holding the phone in front of Kevin's face as he sat at the kitchen table with his morning coffee. He looked at the screen, and I watched the color drain from his face. Whatever he had expected when I found out, he had not expected it to happen this quickly or this definitively. For a moment, he said nothing, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Vanessa, I can explain." "Then explain. Explain why my dead father's Rolex is on your mother's wrist. Explain why she's posting about it on Instagram, calling it a gift from her wonderful son. Explain how you could take the most precious thing I own and give it to a woman who has never shown me anything but contempt." His face cycled through several expressions, settling finally on something that looked almost like defiance. "She's my mother, Vanessa. She's always wanted a Rolex, ever since I was a kid. She used to talk about how one day when I was successful, I would buy her one." "So you stole mine." "It's not stealing when we're married. What's yours is mine." I felt something inside me snap, some final thread of patience or tolerance that had been stretched to its breaking point. "That watch was my separate property, Kevin. It was given to me by my dying father. It has nothing to do with our marriage and everything to do with my family legacy. You had no right to touch it." "You never even wear it," he argued, his voice rising to match mine. "It just sits in that safe collecting dust while my mother has wanted a nice watch her entire life. I wear it every single day. I was going to wear it to my father's memorial ceremony yesterday. Do you understand that? I was going to honor my father's memory wearing the watch he gave me, and instead I had to stand there with an empty wrist because you stole it for your mother." Kevin stood up from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're being dramatic. It's just a watch. Your father is gone, Vanessa. He's not coming back. Holding on to material objects isn't going to bring him back." The cruelty of his words took my breath away. "Just a watch. Your father is gone." As if grief had an expiration date. As if the physical reminders of loved ones were meaningless once they died. I thought about my father's hands, the hands that had held that watch every day for 30 years, the hands that had performed thousands of surgeries and held me when I cried and guided me through every challenge of my life. Those hands were gone now, but the watch remained, a tangible connection to everything he had been. "I want it back," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Call your mother right now and tell her to return my father's watch." "I'm not doing that. It would humiliate her." "She humiliated me. She posted about it on social media, Kevin. She made sure I would see it. She wanted me to know that she has my father's watch because her son values her more than he values his wife. You're reading too much into this. She was just happy about the gift. The gift you stole from me." We argued for another hour, going in circles, Kevin making excuses and deflecting blame while I grew colder and more certain with every passing minute. He would not call his mother. He would not demand the watch back. He would not even acknowledge that what he had done was wrong. In his mind, I was the unreasonable one, the dramatic one, the woman who valued material objects over family harmony. When he finally left for work, slamming the door behind him, I sat alone in the kitchen and began to think strategically. Kevin had revealed more than he intended during our argument. His defensiveness, his deflection, his complete lack of remorse, all of it painted a picture of a man who did not see me as a partner to be respected, but as a resource to be managed. I thought about the last few years of our marriage, about the slow erosion of connection and intimacy. Kevin spent more and more time at his mother's house, helping with projects and errands that seemed to multiply endlessly. He compared me unfavorably to Lorraine's cooking, her housekeeping, her traditional values. He criticized my work hours, my ambition, my failure to prioritize his needs above my career. I had attributed his behavior to stress, to the natural evolution of a long-term relationship, to adjustments that every couple had to make. I had never considered that he might be actively working against me, that he might see our marriage as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. I pulled up our financial records on my laptop and began to examine them with new eyes. The joint account we used for household expenses showed regular transfers to an account I did not recognize. Small amounts at first, a few $100s here and there, but growing larger over time. In the past 3 years, more than $45,000 had been transferred to this mysterious account. I traced the account to Lorraine. Kevin had been sending money to his mother for years, draining our household funds to support a woman who had her own income, her own house, her own resources. The transfers were labeled as medical expenses, suggesting some ongoing health crisis that required financial support. But I had never heard of Lorraine having any serious medical issues. She was 70 years old and healthy as a horse, still gardening and traveling and posting endlessly on social media. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of what Kevin had been doing behind my back. That evening, while Kevin was supposedly at a work dinner, I accessed his personal laptop. We had always shared passwords, a sign of trust that now felt laughably naive. His email was open, and I began to search through his correspondence with his mother. What I found made my blood run cold. The emails stretched back years, a chronicle of deception and manipulation that I had been completely blind to. Lorraine complained about me constantly, calling me arrogant, selfish, cold. She told Kevin that he deserved better, that I did not appreciate him, that I was using him for his emotional support while contributing nothing to the marriage. The irony of that accusation, given that I paid for virtually everything we owned, was almost laughable. But the worst was Kevin's responses. He agreed with his mother. He complained about my work schedule, my independence, my failure to defer to his judgment. He called me difficult, demanding, impossible to please. And in one email sent just 3 months ago, he had written something that stopped my heart. I've talked to a lawyer. In Texas, after 10 years of marriage, I'll be entitled to half of everything she's accumulated during the marriage. If I can just hold on for 3 more years, I can walk away with the house, half her investments, and enough alimony to live comfortably. She'll never see it coming. 3 more years. He was planning to endure 3 more years of marriage to me so he could claim half of everything I had built. He saw our relationship as an investment, a long-term scheme to extract maximum value from a woman he did not love or respect. I sat back from the computer, my mind racing. Kevin thought I was oblivious. He thought I would continue working and earning and building wealth while he bided his time, waiting for the optimal moment to strike. He had already stolen my father's watch. He was planning to steal everything else, but he had miscalculated. He did not understand Texas property law as well as he thought he did. And he certainly did not understand me. I forwarded the relevant emails to myself, then deleted the evidence of my snooping. Kevin would have no idea that I had discovered his plan. He would continue to believe that I was blind and trusting, the perfect mark for his long game. He was about to discover that the surgeon he had married was more than capable of performing a clean extraction when necessary. The next few days were a masterclass in deception. I went to work, performed surgeries, attended meetings, and came home to cook dinner and make conversation with a husband I now knew was actively plotting against me. I smiled when he told jokes, agreed when he made suggestions, and pretended that nothing had changed between us. At night, while he slept, I continued my investigation. I discovered that Kevin had changed the beneficiary on his life insurance policy from me to Lorraine, without telling me or asking my consent. I found credit card statements showing purchases I had never seen, gifts that must have gone to his mother or been hidden away for some future purpose. I documented every transfer, every expense, every piece of evidence that would support my case when the time came. I also researched the legal aspects of my situation. Texas was a community property state, which meant that assets acquired during marriage were generally considered jointly owned. Kevin's plan hinged on this principle, but what he did not seem to understand was that property owned before marriage, or inherited during marriage, remained separate property. My house had been purchased 2 years before we met, with money I had saved and a down payment from my father. The investments I had accumulated before our wedding were in accounts that had never been commingled with marital funds. Even my retirement accounts were protected because Kevin had signed a prenuptial agreement acknowledging their separate status. The prenup. Kevin had complained about it before our wedding, had called it unromantic and unnecessary, but I had insisted, and he had eventually signed. At the time, I thought I was just being prudent. Now I understood that my father's influence had protected me even then. He had advised me to get a prenup, had warned me that love was no guarantee against the complications of life. I had listened, and that decision was about to save me from Kevin's scheming. My father. I thought about him constantly during those days of investigation and planning. I thought about his strength, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to doing what was right, even when it was difficult. He had faced discrimination and doubt throughout his career, had been told repeatedly that he did not belong in the upper echelons of medicine, and he had responded by being so excellent that no one could deny his achievements. I would honor his memory by protecting myself, by refusing to be exploited by people who saw me as nothing more than a means to their ends. I would get his watch back, and I would ensure that Kevin and Lorraine understood the true cost of their betrayal. I called my friend Nicole, an attorney who specialized in high-asset divorces, and scheduled a consultation. When I sat in her office and laid out everything I had discovered, her expression shifted from professional interest to genuine anger. "Vanessa, this is fraud," she said. "The money transfers, the beneficiary changes, the theft of the watch. Your husband has been systematically deceiving you for years. Can I prove it? With what you've shown me?" "Absolutely. The email where he admits to planning a divorce to claim your assets is particularly damning. And the watch theft is straightforward. That was your separate property, inherited from your father. He had no right to give it away. We spent 2 hours developing a strategy. Nicole would prepare divorce papers that documented Kevin's misconduct and his fraudulent intentions. She would also prepare a demand for return of the watch, with the threat of criminal charges if Lorraine did not comply. Most importantly, she would help me understand exactly what I was entitled to keep and what, if anything, Kevin could claim. The answer was almost nothing. My house, my investments, my retirement accounts were all protected by the prenup and the documentation I had maintained over the years. Kevin might be entitled to a small portion of the equity that had accumulated in the house during our marriage, but even that was questionable given his fraud. Nicole believed we could argue that his misconduct voided any claims he might otherwise have had. "When do you want to file?" she asked. "Not yet. I had been thinking about this for days, turning the possibilities over in my mind. His mother's 70th birthday party is in 3 weeks. It's going to be a big event, all the family there. I've been paying for everything, of course." Nicole raised an eyebrow. "You want to do this publicly?" "I want them to understand what they've lost and why. I want his family to know the truth. And I want my father's watch back in my hand before the night is over." Nicole smiled, a sharp expression that reminded me why she had such a formidable reputation. "Then let's make sure you're ready." The 3 weeks leading up to Lorraine's birthday party were the most difficult performance of my life. I continued to play the role of dutiful wife, compliant daughter-in-law, and primary financial contributor to a family that was secretly plotting against me. I wrote checks for the party venue, the catering, the decorations, the DJ, watching the money flow out of my account with the grim satisfaction of knowing it would be the last time. Meanwhile, I built my case with the meticulous precision that had made me successful in surgery. Nicole had given me a checklist of documentation to gather, and I worked through it systematically, photographing every relevant document, downloading every suspicious transaction, preserving every piece of evidence that would support my claims. The financial picture that emerged was even worse than I had initially discovered. Kevin had been siphoning money from our household for nearly the entire duration of our marriage. The $45,000 I had originally found was just the beginning. When I traced all the irregular transactions, the hidden credit cards, the cash withdrawals that he claimed were for various household expenses, the total approached $70,000 over 7 years. $70,000. Money I had earned through years of education, training, and grueling work. Money that should have gone toward our future, our retirement, our shared life. Instead, it had flowed to Lorraine, funding renovations to her house, trips she took with her friends, gifts she gave to her other children and grandchildren. Kevin had been using me as a personal ATM to enhance his standing with his mother and family. I found receipts for the renovation of Lorraine's kitchen, completed 2 years ago and paid for with transfers Kevin had labeled as medical expenses. I found credit card statements showing purchases at jewelry stores, furniture stores, and travel agencies, none of which corresponded to anything I had received or any trip we had taken together. I found a savings account Kevin had opened in his name alone, funded by systematic transfers from our joint account, containing nearly $20,000 he had hidden away for his eventual escape. The betrayal was comprehensive and calculated. Kevin had approached our marriage like a business venture, investing minimal resources while extracting maximum value. He had smiled at me over breakfast, slept beside me at night, and told me he loved me, all while systematically stealing from me and planning his eventual departure. I thought about all the times I had defended him to colleagues who questioned why a successful surgeon would marry a mediocre accountant. I had talked about partnership and love and valuing people for who they were rather than what they earned. I had believed in the life we were building together, had trusted that our marriage was a genuine union of two people who cared for each other. That belief had been naive. That trust had been misplaced. And that woman who had defended her husband to skeptical friends was gone now, replaced by someone harder, colder, and absolutely determined to reclaim what had been stolen. I also investigated Lorraine more thoroughly, and what I found was revealing. She had her own income from her late husband's pension and Social Security, more than enough to live comfortably in the modest house she owned outright. She had no medical issues beyond the normal complaints of a 70-year-old, certainly nothing that would require the tens of thousands of dollars Kevin had sent her under the guise of medical expenses. She was simply greedy, accustomed to being supported by her son at his wife's expense, entitled to whatever she could extract from the marriage she had never approved of. The messages between Kevin and Lorraine were the most damning evidence of all. I had continued to monitor his email, discovering new exchanges that revealed the depth of their conspiracy. Lorraine had encouraged Kevin to give her my father's watch, dismissing my feelings with casual cruelty. "That woman acts like her father was some kind of saint," Lorraine had written. "He was just a doctor, Kevin. Lots of people are doctors. She needs to get over herself and her precious heirlooms. Just a doctor." My father had been one of the first black cardiac surgeons in Texas, a pioneer who had saved thousands of lives and opened doors for countless others. He had grown up in poverty, worked his way through medical school, and achieved a level of success that few people of any background ever reached. And Lorraine dismissed him as just a doctor, while coveting the watch he had worn every day for 30 years. Kevin's response had been equally infuriating. "I know, Mama. She's always been obsessed with her father. It's unhealthy. You deserve that watch more than she does. She never even appreciated what it was worth. Unhealthy." My love for my father, my grief at his death, my desire to hold on to the physical reminders of his life, characterized as unhealthy by a man who called his mother every day and sent her money he stole from his wife. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I added these messages to my evidence file, watching the case against Kevin grow stronger with each new discovery. Nicole reviewed everything weekly, confirming that we had more than enough to proceed and advising me on timing and strategy. "The birthday party is perfect," she said during our final planning meeting. "You'll have witnesses, you'll have the element of surprise, and you'll be able to recover the watch immediately. After that, we file everything simultaneously. The divorce petition, the fraud complaint, the demand for restitution. He won't know what hit him." I nodded, feeling the calm focus that always descended when I was preparing for a complex surgery. The operation was planned, the instruments were ready, and the patient was sedated, unaware of what was about to happen. All that remained was execution. The night before the party, I took out the navy dress I had worn to my father's memorial ceremony and laid it across my bed. I had not been able to bring myself to wear it again since that terrible day when I discovered the watch was missing. But tomorrow I would put it on again. Tomorrow I would stand in front of Kevin's family wearing the dress my father had loved, and I would take back what belonged to me. I thought about my father, about what he would say if he could see what I was about to do. I believed he would understand. He had always taught me that excellence was the best revenge, but he had also taught me that sometimes you had to fight for what was yours. Sometimes the only way to honor the people you loved was to protect yourself from the people who would use their memory against you. Tomorrow, Lorraine Brooks would turn 70 years old, and before the night was over, she would understand exactly what it cost to steal from Harold Mitchell's daughter. The morning of the party dawned gray and humid, typical Houston weather that matched the steel in my heart. I went through my preparations methodically, each action bringing me closer to the confrontation I had been planning for weeks. I had arranged for Nicole to be present at the party, ostensibly as my friend, but actually to serve the divorce papers at the appropriate moment. I had also alerted a private investigator I had hired to document any attempts by Kevin or Lorraine to destroy evidence or flee once the revelations began. Every contingency had been considered, every detail planned. Kevin was cheerful that morning, excited about his mother's party, oblivious to what was coming. He complimented my dress, told me I looked beautiful, and thanked me for everything I had done to make his mother's birthday special. The irony was not lost on me. He was thanking me for financing the event where his duplicity would be exposed, where his comfortable life of theft and deception would come crashing down around him. "Mom is so happy," he said as we drove to the venue, a country club I had rented for the occasion. "She's been talking about this party for months. All her friends are coming, all the family. It's going to be perfect." Perfect, yes, I thought. It certainly will be. The venue was decorated beautifully, everything in Lorraine's favorite colors of purple and gold. The catering staff I had hired was setting up an impressive buffet. The DJ was testing his equipment, filling the room with the old soul music that Lorraine loved. And at the center of it all, displayed on the gift table, was a large photograph of the birthday girl, smiling and proud. Guests began arriving around noon. Kevin's sister Angela came with her husband and 3 children. His brother Michael arrived with his wife. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, church friends, everyone who mattered in Lorraine's social circle had been invited, and most had come. They greeted me warmly enough, though I had always sensed a reserve in their manner, a loyalty to Lorraine that precluded genuine acceptance of the outsider she had never approved of. I moved through the crowd with practiced grace, making small talk and accepting compliments on the event. Nicole positioned herself near the entrance, ready to intercept Kevin if he tried to leave. My investigator was stationed outside, monitoring the parking lot. Everything was in place. And then Lorraine arrived. She swept into the room like royalty receiving her subjects, dressed in a purple suit that I suspected had been purchased with money Kevin had stolen from me. Her hair was freshly done, her makeup flawless, her smile radiating the satisfaction of a woman who believed she had won. And on her wrist, catching the light with every gesture, was my father's Rolex. I watched her show it off to her friends, lifting her arm to display the watch, telling stories about what a wonderful son she had, how he always took care of her, how he knew what really mattered in life. I listened to her accept compliments on the beautiful timepiece, never once mentioning whose wrist it had adorned for 30 years before coming to her. The anger I felt was cold and controlled, a surgeon's anger that would wait for the right moment to cut. I smiled and nodded and played my role, counting down the minutes until the speeches would begin and I would have my opportunity. Kevin found me near the bar, his face flushed with pleasure at the success of the event. "Isn't this great? Mom is so happy. Thank you for doing all of this, Vanessa. I know you and Mom haven't always gotten along, but this really means a lot to both of us." I looked at him, at this man I had married and trusted and built a life with, and I felt nothing but contempt. "It's my pleasure," I said. I wanted this day to be memorable. And it would be, just not in the way he expected. The speeches began at 2:00. Angela went first, telling stories about growing up with Lorraine, about the sacrifices their mother had made, about the values she had instilled in her children. Michael spoke next, echoing similar themes, praising Lorraine's strength and devotion. Other family members took their turns, painting a portrait of a woman who was apparently beloved by all, and then it was my turn. I had told Kevin I wanted to say a few words, and he had been surprised but pleased, interpreting my offer as an olive branch, a sign that I was finally ready to embrace his family fully. He had no idea that the words I was about to speak would burn that olive branch to ash. I walked to the microphone and looked out at the assembled guests, at Lorraine sitting in her place of honor, at Kevin beaming with pride, at all the people who had treated me as an outsider for 7 years. I took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate Lorraine's 70th birthday. 70 years is a milestone worth honoring, a testament to a life fully lived." I paused, letting the words settle. I've been part of this family for 7 years now, and in that time, I've learned a lot about what family means to the Brooks family. I've learned about loyalty, about sacrifice, about what people are willing to do for the ones they love. I saw Kevin nodding, still oblivious. Lorraine was smiling, accepting what she thought were compliments. I've also learned about the value of honesty. My father taught me that. He was a man who believed that the truth mattered, even when it was difficult to hear. He was Dr. Harold Mitchell, one of the first Black cardiac surgeons in Texas, a pioneer who saved thousands of lives and opened doors for countless others. The room was quiet now, people sensing a shift in tone they could not quite identify. My father gave me something before he died, a Rolex watch that he had worn every day for 30 years. It was a symbol of everything he had achieved, everything he had overcome. He told me to wear it when I needed to remember that I came from people who did impossible things. I looked directly at Lorraine, at my father's watch glinting on her wrist. That watch was stolen from my home, stolen by my husband, and given to this woman who is wearing it right now. The room erupted. The chaos that followed my revelation was everything I had anticipated and more. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward Lorraine, toward Kevin, toward the watch that suddenly seemed to glow with accusation on the birthday girl's wrist. Kevin's face had gone pale, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to process what was happening. Lorraine's expression had frozen into a mask of shock and indignation. "Vanessa, what are you doing?" Kevin finally managed, his voice cracking. "This is my mother's birthday party." "I know exactly what it is," I replied, my voice steady and clear through the microphone. "It's an event I paid for entirely, just like I've paid for everything else in our marriage. Every dollar that funded this party came from my income, my savings, my work. Just like the $70,000 your husband has stolen from our household over the past 7 years and given to his mother." The second revelation hit like a bomb. Family members who had been looking at Lorraine with confusion now turned to Kevin with something approaching horror. His brother Michael stepped forward, his expression troubled. "Kevin, what is she talking about?" "She's lying," Lorraine spat, finally finding her voice. "She's always been jealous of my relationship with my son. She can't stand that he loves his mother." "I have documentation," I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out a folder I had prepared for this moment. "Bank statements showing regular transfers from our joint account to your personal account, Lorraine. Emails between you and Kevin discussing how to extract money from me while planning his eventual divorce. Messages where you call me arrogant and say I don't deserve my father's watch." I handed the folder to Michael, who was closest to me. He opened it and began flipping through the pages, his face growing darker with each document he reviewed. "She's making this up," Kevin insisted, but his voice had lost its conviction. "Vanessa, please, we can talk about this privately." "We're well past private conversations, Kevin." I turned back to the room, to the assembled family and friends who were watching this drama unfold with horrified fascination. For 7 years, I have worked and earned and contributed to this family. I have paid for vacations, cars, home improvements, and yes, birthday parties. I have been generous because I believed in partnership, in family, in the possibility that people could love each other despite differences. I looked at Lorraine, at the watch she was now trying to hide beneath her sleeve. But I was wrong. I wasn't a partner to your son. I was a funding source, an ATM, a convenient target for two people who saw my success as something to exploit rather than celebrate. That's enough. Kevin strode toward me, his face contorted with anger. "You're embarrassing yourself and my mother. We're leaving. You can leave whenever you like." I stood my ground, not flinching as he approached. "But before you go, I want my father's watch back." Kevin stopped, looking at his mother. Lorraine clutched her wrist protectively, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. "It was a gift," she said, her voice shrill. "Kevin gave it to me. It's mine now. It was never Kevin's to give. That watch was my separate property, inherited from my father. I have the documentation proving its provenance, its value, and my exclusive ownership." I smiled, a cold expression that held no warmth. "I also have a police officer waiting outside, ready to take a report for theft if you don't return it voluntarily." The mention of police changed the atmosphere entirely. Several guests began moving toward the exits, uncomfortable with being witnesses to what was clearly becoming a legal matter. Kevin's sister Angela approached her mother, her expression conflicted. "Mama, just give her the watch. This isn't worth going to jail over." "I'm not going to jail. She can't prove anything." "Actually, I can prove everything." I pulled out my phone and showed the screen to the room. I have security footage from my home showing Kevin taking the watch from my safe. I have his fingerprints on the box it was stored in. I have his emails admitting he took it and gave it to you. If this goes to court, you will lose, and you will have a criminal record for theft. Lorraine's face crumpled. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, watching her carefully constructed world collapse around her. But then I thought about my father, about the watch he had worn every day for 30 years, about the way she had dismissed his legacy as nothing special, and my sympathy evaporated. "Give me the watch, Lorraine, now." The room was silent, everyone watching as Lorraine slowly, reluctantly, unfastened the clasp of my father's Rolex. Her hands were trembling as she held it out to me, and I took it with a satisfaction so deep it felt like finally being able to breathe after months underwater. I fastened the watch on my own wrist, feeling the familiar weight of the steel and gold band, the cool pressure of the case against my skin. My father was with me again. His legacy was back where it belonged. "There's one more thing," I said, turning to where Nicole had appeared at the edge of the crowd. She walked forward and handed Kevin a manila envelope. "You're being served with divorce papers. You have 30 days to vacate my house. My lawyer will be in contact about the restitution you owe me for the money you've stolen over the past 7 years." Kevin stared at the envelope in his hands, his face a mask of disbelief. "You can't do this. I'm your husband. I have rights." "You signed a prenuptial agreement, Kevin. The house was mine before we married and remains mine. My investments are protected. My retirement accounts are protected. The only thing you're entitled to is what you brought into this marriage, which was essentially nothing." I gathered my purse and prepared to leave. "You gambled that you could steal from me for a few more years and then walk away with half of everything. You lost." I walked toward the exit, passing through a crowd that parted before me like water. Some faces showed shock, others showed something that looked almost like respect. Lorraine was crying, Kevin was shouting something I did not bother to hear, and the beautiful birthday party I had paid for was descending into chaos. I did not look back. Nicole fell into step beside me as I crossed the parking lot. "That was impressive," she said. "How do you feel?" I looked down at my father's watch, at the scratch near the 3 o'clock position that held so many memories. I thought about the surgery ahead, the legal battles, the emotional recovery that would take months or years. But beneath all of that, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. I felt free. "I feel like my father would be proud of me," I said. "I feel like I finally did what he would have wanted me to do. Protect yourself? Honor his memory." By refusing to let people who didn't value it anywhere near his legacy. We reached my car, and I paused before getting in, taking one last look at the country club where my marriage had just ended. Through the windows, I could see people milling around, probably gossiping about what they had witnessed. Kevin's family would have opinions, would probably blame me for ruining Lorraine's birthday, for exposing their golden boy as a thief and a fraud. I did not care. Let them think what they wanted. I had my father's watch, my house, my career, and my self-respect. Everything else was negotiable. I drove home through the Houston streets, watching the afternoon sun glint off the Rolex on my wrist. My father had bought this watch in 1985, the year of his 100th successful bypass surgery. He had worn it through triumphs and struggles, through the birth of his daughter and the death of his wife, through every surgery and every milestone of a remarkable life. Now it would witness my own journey, my divorce, my recovery, my emergence from the ashes of a marriage that had been built on lies. I was Vanessa Mitchell, daughter of Harold Mitchell, surgeon and survivor. And this was only the beginning. The aftermath of the birthday party spread through Kevin's family like wildfire. Within hours, my phone was flooded with messages and calls, some supportive, most accusatory. Angela texted to say she was sorry for what her brother had done, that she had always suspected something was wrong, that she hoped I would find peace. Michael called to demand that I drop the divorce and work things out like adults, clearly more concerned with family reputation than with justice. I ignored most of them. My focus now was on the legal and practical matters that would determine my future. Kevin came home that night, his face haggard, his suit rumpled from hours of damage control. He found me in the living room, calmly reading a book, my father's watch secure on my wrist. "We need to talk," he said. "There's nothing to talk about. You've been served. The divorce is proceeding. You have 30 days to find alternative living arrangements. Vanessa, please. He sat down across from me, his posture defeated. I made mistakes. I know that. But 7 years of marriage has to count for something. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. I looked at him, at this man I had loved and trusted, and I saw him clearly for the first time. The charm that had attracted me was manipulation. The support he had offered was calculation. The partnership I had believed in was a fiction he had created to keep me compliant while he exploited me. You didn't make mistakes, Kevin. You made choices. Every time you transferred money to your mother, you chose to steal from me. Every time you complained about me in those emails, you chose to betray me. When you took my father's watch and gave it to a woman who despised me, you chose to desecrate my family's legacy. I closed my book and set it aside. Choices have consequences. These are yours. I never meant to hurt you. That's exactly the problem. You never thought about hurting me at all. You never considered my feelings, my needs, my attachment to my father's memory. I was invisible to you, Kevin, just a source of income with a pulse. He tried other tactics over the following days: anger, bargaining, threats, and finally desperate pleading. He claimed he would change, would go to therapy, would do whatever it took to save our marriage. He offered to repay the money he had stolen, to cut off contact with his mother, to become the husband I deserved. But it was too late. The man who might have saved our marriage through genuine effort and changed behavior had never existed. Kevin was simply adapting his strategy, saying whatever he thought I wanted to hear in order to maintain access to the lifestyle he had grown accustomed to. Once a manipulator, always a manipulator. I spent those 30 days preparing for my new life. I changed the locks on my house, updated my will, and removed Kevin from all my accounts and policies. I worked with Nicole to finalize the divorce settlement, which left Kevin with essentially nothing. The prenuptial agreement I had insisted on, the agreement he had resented and tried to talk me out of, protected everything I had built. The day Kevin moved out was anticlimactic. He had rented a small truck and loaded his personal belongings, the clothes and books and golf clubs that were all he could claim as his own. His mother was there to help him, her presence a final insult that I observed through my kitchen window without engaging. Before he drove away, Kevin came to the door one last time. "I hope you're happy," he said, his voice bitter. "You've ruined everything. I thought about my father, about his strength and dignity in the face of people who had tried to diminish him throughout his career. I thought about the watch on my wrist, about the legacy it represented, about the future I was now free to build without the weight of a toxic marriage dragging me down. No, Kevin," I said. "I finally started to fix what you broke." I closed the door and listened to the truck pull away, carrying my ex-husband to his mother's house, to the cramped rooms and diminished circumstances that would be his new reality. The house was quiet now, truly mine for the first time in 7 years. I walked to the window and looked out at my garden, at the life I had built through years of education and training and grueling work. I had lost a husband, but I had gained something more valuable. I had gained the knowledge of who I really was, what I was capable of, and what I would never again tolerate. My father's watch caught the afternoon light as I raised my hand to the glass. He was with me still, in every heartbeat, in every breath, in the determination that had brought me through this fire and would carry me forward into whatever came next. 1 year after the birthday party that ended my marriage, I stood in the surgical suite of Houston Methodist Hospital, preparing for a complex spinal reconstruction. My team moved around me with practiced efficiency, nurses and technicians and residents who had become like family over my years at this institution. The patient on the table was a young woman, a college athlete whose promising career had been derailed by a congenital defect we were now working to correct. My father's Rolex was in my locker, as it always was during surgery. I did not risk damaging it in the operating room, but I wore it every other moment of every day. It had become my talisman, my reminder of where I came from and who I was meant to be. The surgery took 6 hours, delicate work that required every ounce of skill and focus I possessed. When it was over, when the patient was stable and heading to recovery with an excellent prognosis, I felt the familiar satisfaction that made all the years of training worthwhile. This was why I had become a surgeon. This was the legacy my father had passed to me. Not just a watch, but a commitment to healing, to service, to using my gifts for something greater than myself. I changed out of my scrubs and checked my phone, finding the usual collection of messages and notifications. One caught my eye, a text from my mother. Saw Kevin today. He's working at the department store in the Galleria. Looked like he aged 10 years. Just thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long moment, processing the information. Kevin, the man who had mocked my long hours and demanding career, the man who had believed he was entitled to half of everything I had built, was now working retail at a department store. It was a far cry from the accounting firm where he had spent our marriage, the job he had lost 3 months after our divorce when his former employer discovered irregularities in his expense reports that mirrored what he had done to me. His mother had fared no better. The renovation she had funded with stolen money had to be reversed when the court ordered restitution. Unable to pay back the $45,000 Kevin had transferred to her, Lorraine had been forced to sell her house and move into a small apartment across town. The social circle she had cultivated, the church friends and neighbors who had celebrated her at that fateful birthday party, had largely distanced themselves once the full truth emerged. I did not take pleasure in their downfall. That surprised me sometimes, the absence of vindictive satisfaction when I heard about their struggles. But my father had taught me that revenge was a waste of energy, that the best response to those who wronged you was to build a life so successful and fulfilling that their opinions became irrelevant. I had taken his lesson to heart. My life in the year since the divorce had been a testament to that philosophy. I had been promoted to chief of orthopedic surgery, the youngest person and the first Black woman to hold that position in the hospital's history. I had published 3 papers in respected medical journals. I had mentored a new generation of residents, passing on the knowledge and skills that my father had helped me develop. And I had started dating again, cautiously, with the wisdom that comes from having been burned. His name was Marcus, a pediatric oncologist I had met at a medical conference. He was kind and patient, and genuinely interested in my work, my thoughts, my dreams. He had met my mother and impressed her, no small feat for a woman who had become fiercely protective of her daughter after witnessing the destruction Kevin had wrought. I was not ready to remarry, might never be ready for that level of vulnerability again, but I was open to connection, to partnership, to the possibility that not everyone who claimed to love me had ulterior motives. Healing was possible. Trust could be rebuilt, even if it would never be as easily given as it once was. The anniversary of my father's death fell on a Wednesday that year, and I took the day off to visit his grave. The cemetery was peaceful, the autumn air crisp with the promise of cooler weather to come. I sat beside his headstone for a long time, talking to him as I often did, telling him about my cases and my promotion and the life I was building. "I got your watch back, Daddy," I said, touching the Rolex on my wrist. "I know you're probably not surprised. You always said I was stubborn like Mama." I laughed, then felt the familiar sting of tears. "I wish you could have seen me at the birthday party. I was strong, just like you taught me. I didn't let them break me." A breeze rustled through the trees, and I chose to believe it was him, acknowledging me, telling me he was proud. The rational part of my brain knew it was just wind, but the part that still missed him desperately needed to believe in something more. That evening, I had dinner with my mother at Gloria's, a soul food restaurant that had been her and my father's favorite spot. We talked about memories and family and the future, the way we always did when we were together. She had become my rock in the year since the divorce, her quiet strength a model for my own recovery. "Your father would be so proud of you," she said, echoing my thoughts from earlier. "Not because of the promotion or the papers, though those are wonderful, but because you stood up for yourself. You didn't let them steal your dignity along with that watch." "I learned from the best," I said. "From both of you." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her eyes bright with tears she was too dignified to shed in public. "You're going to be fine, baby. More than fine. You're going to be extraordinary." As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The grief and the betrayal, the discovery and the confrontation, The slow, painful work of rebuilding a life that had been systematically undermined by people I trusted. I had not ruined Kevin and Lorraine's lives. That was a dramatic way to frame what had happened, the kind of headline that suggested deliberate destruction. The truth was simpler and, in some ways, more profound. I had simply stopped allowing them to benefit from my labor, my success, my generosity. I had withdrawn the support that had propped up their comfortable existence, and without it, they had crumbled under the weight of their own inadequacy. The ruins of their lives were not my creation. They were the natural consequence of building on a foundation of theft and deception. When that foundation was removed, the structure collapsed. That was not revenge. That was physics. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house I had bought with my own money, maintained with my own labor, protected through my own foresight. It was fully mine now, unencumbered by a husband who saw it as his future payday. The garden I had planted was thriving. The windows glowed with warm light. Inside, there was peace and safety and the freedom to be exactly who I was. I looked at my father's watch one more time, at the scratch near the 3 o'clock position that held so many memories. He had worn this watch through the best and worst moments of his life. Now it would witness mine. I was Vanessa Mitchell, surgeon and survivor, daughter of a pioneer who had taught me to do impossible things. The people who had tried to steal my legacy had lost everything, and I had gained something they could never take from me. I had gained myself. 3 months after the anniversary of my father's death, I received an unexpected call. It was from Angela, Kevin's sister, the one family member who had shown me any kindness during the aftermath of the birthday party. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling," she said, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted you to know that Kevin has been talking about reaching out to you. I wanted to warn you." "Reaching out about what?" "He wants to apologize. He says he's had time to think about everything, and he realizes how wrong he was. He wants a chance to make amends." I was quiet for a moment, considering this information. Kevin wanting to apologize. Kevin claiming to have realized his wrongs. Kevin seeking a chance to make amends. It sounded good, the kind of thing that might tempt a woman who still harbored hope for reconciliation or closure. But I was not that woman anymore. "Thank you for telling me, Angela. But I have no interest in hearing from Kevin. Whatever he has to say, it's too late. The time for apologies was before he stole my father's watch, not a year after he was caught." "I understand. I told him you'd probably feel that way, but he insisted I try." She paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry too. I should have seen what was happening. I should have said something. You didn't know. None of us knew what we didn't want to see." We talked for a few more minutes, about her children, about my work, about the neutral topics that allowed us to maintain a connection without revisiting painful history. When we hung up, I felt a strange sense of closure. Angela's call had confirmed what I already knew. Kevin had not changed. He was simply trying a new strategy, hoping that enough time had passed to make me receptive to his manipulation again. It had not. It never would. The following week, I was invited to speak at a conference for women in medicine, a gathering of surgeons and physicians from across the country who were navigating the unique challenges of our profession. My topic was resilience, the ability to recover from setbacks and continue forward. I spoke about my father, about his journey from poverty to prominence, about the watch he had given me and what it represented. I also spoke about my divorce, carefully and without naming names, about the experience of discovering that someone I trusted had been exploiting me. I talked about the importance of protecting yourself, financially and emotionally, about the value of having your own resources and your own identity separate from any relationship. I talked about the difference between revenge and justice, between destroying others and simply refusing to be destroyed yourself. The response was overwhelming. Women approached me afterward to share their own stories, their own experiences with manipulation and betrayal, their own journeys toward recovery. I realized that my story, as painful as it had been to live through, might help others who were facing similar situations. That realization gave my suffering a purpose it had not had before. On the flight home, I looked out the window at the clouds below and thought about where I had been and where I was going. The past year had transformed me in ways I was still discovering. I was harder in some ways, more guarded, less willing to give my trust freely. But I was also stronger, more confident, more certain of my own worth and capabilities. I touched my father's watch, feeling the familiar weight that had become as natural as my own heartbeat. He had worn this watch through transformation too, through the journey from a small house in Third Ward to the highest levels of his profession. He had faced doubt and discrimination and obstacles that would have stopped lesser people, and he had prevailed through talent and determination and an unshakable belief in his own worth. I was his daughter, his legacy, his greatest accomplishment, and I would honor that legacy by building a life worthy of it. The ruins of my marriage were behind me now, receding into history with each passing day. Ahead was a future limited only by my own imagination and effort. I had lost a husband, but I had found myself. I had been betrayed, but I had emerged stronger. I had faced the worst that people could do, and I had discovered that I was more than capable of surviving it. My father's watch ticked steadily against my wrist, marking the seconds and minutes of a life well lived. His story had ended, but mine was still being written, and the chapters ahead would be magnificent. I was certain of it.